Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Valencia, and it is a real pleasure to welcome you to the 2026 Assessment and Accountability Information Meeting, also known as AIM. This meeting is brought to you by the California Department of Education. And the theme for this year, for this year's AIM updates, is the AIM Toolkit Edition. This year's updates focuses on providing clearer guidance, streamlined communication, and improved access to key information for sites and interest holders. Using a toolkit approach, this presentation highlights the resources, templates, and supports designed to help teams implement requirements more effectively. As we move through the slides, keep an eye on the icons. As you can see here, there's 3 of them. The exclamation mark, that indicates updated resources, tools, guidance, or instructions. And the next one is an empty toolbox with the arrow pointing down to it. That indicates the tools and resources you already have. And then the toolbox with stars bursting out of it, if you will. These are new tools being introduced through this year. So keep an eye on those slides, those particular slides that have those icons. That's where you want to pay extra attention. All righty, with that, let's get started and open up our toolkit with a welcome message. To kick off this informational meeting series, please welcome Mary Nicely, Deputy Superintendent of the California Department of Education, or CDE's Information and Technology Branch.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we kick off the first meeting of 2 in the 2026 Assessment and Accountability Information Meeting Series. That's a mouthful. I am Mary Nicely, the Deputy Superintendent of the Information and Technology Branch, which includes both assessment and accountability. This annual meeting series is part of CDE's ongoing communication efforts to share program updates and provide you with the information you need to successfully plan for, prepare for, and understand California's assessment and accountability systems. Today, we are focused on assessment updates. We are dedicating the meeting on August 20th to the California School Dashboard and accountability updates. The purpose of this meeting series is to provide a local educational agency or LEA coordinators with the most recent information and developments about California's assessment and accountability systems. Today's presenters are staff from the Assessment Development and Administration Division, or ADAD, which is led by Director Mao Vang. The next meeting on August 20th will be presented by staff in the Analysis, Measurement, and Accountability Reporting Division, or AMARD, led by Director Cindy Kazanis. Today's CDE's assessment program staff will provide you with the latest updates to the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or CAASPP, system, which includes the Smarter Balanced ELA and Math assessments, the California Science Assessment, or CAST, the California Alternate Assessments, or CAAs, and the California Spanish Assessment, or CSA. I don't know if you're acronymed out already. I know I am. Updates will also be provided for the English language proficiency assessments for California, or ELPAC, the California High School Equivalency and Proficiency programs, and the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. Again, welcome and thank you for being here. We hope the information shared during these 2 sessions is timely, useful, and supportive as you coordinate assessment and accountability efforts. Please welcome our first presenter, Scott Fitzgerald, Education Programs Consultant with the English Language Arts and Mathematics Office at CDE, who will share updates on accessibility. Scott?
Thank you, Mary, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm happy to be here with you all and appreciate you all tuning in. So with that, let's dive right in and talk about some accessibility resources. So the CAASPP and ELPAC assessments provide a wide range of resources. These tools can be used to ensure that the administration of each test meets the needs of all students, including those with disabilities. And these resources can be delivered in 2 different ways. First and foremost, they can be embedded meaning that they are digitally delivered as part of the technology platform on the computer-based test. And this could be things like text-to-speech, for instance, for math and science. And then the other method is what's called non-embedded, and that means that they are provided by the LEA outside of the testing interface. And an example of that would be something like scratch paper. There are also 4 types of resources. These are universal tools, designated supports, accommodations, and unlisted resources. So as a reminder here, universal tools are available to all students based on individual choice or preference. And an example of that would be something like the notepad. Designated supports are available to any student whom a need has been identified by an educator or team of educators who's familiar with that student. And for designated supports, no IEP or 504 is needed. And an example of a designated support would be something like read aloud. And then lastly, we have accommodations and unlisted resources. And these are only available to students with an IEP or a 504, and they actually must be written into the student's IEP or 504. So when we're talking about an accommodation, an example of that would be something like American Sign Language or ASL. All right, well, in sticking with our theme today, one of the most important tools in your toolbox when it comes to CAASPP and ELPAC is the California Accessibility Resources Matrix, also known as just the Matrix. And the Matrix describes all the accessibility options for students by each assessment. So I come to you with good news today. The Matrix has been updated for the 26-27 administration year. It has been posted on our CAASPP and ELPAC website, and a link to that is provided in the resource guide. Yes, lots of people happy about that, I'm sure. Okay, next up, we'll be talking about some updated tools. Sensory items this year have been moved from an accommodation to a designated support for all programs. And probably the most common example we can give you are things like fidget spinners. Also, the designated support embedded translations, known previously as Spanish stacked dual language, has been renamed to dual language translations and translated test directions in Spanish. This now matches how this tool is delivered and actually appears in the test delivery system. And then lastly, the non-embedded calculator accommodation for the Smarter Balanced for Mathematics assessment was renamed to Specialized Calculator. And this update was done to remind LEAs that students can only use a specialized calculator if they are unable to use the embedded calculator, or if they require a special calculator, such as like a Braille calculator or a talking calculator. And this resource can be used only for the calculator allowed items on the mathematics assessment for grades 6 and above. So moving right along here, in addition to the Matrix, other tools have also been updated and are ready to be utilized for the 2026-27 administration. And these tools include the accessibility resource graphics and the student needs matching documents. I know those get used quite a bit. The resource graphics are incredibly useful if you've not yet used them. They are one-page quick reference guides of the available accessibility resources for each assessment. And then the student needs matching documents are relatively new, but these documents were designed to help educators identify resources that can support a student's need for each assessment. And as I mentioned earlier, the Matrix, the resource graphics, and the matching documents have all been updated and are ready for you to use as of today. And links to those great resources are available in your resource guide. So in terms of new tools this year, there is only one new tool for 2026-27, and that is Patty Paper. If you're like me, I wasn't sure what Patty Paper was, but Patty Paper is a thin, translucent paper that allows students to explore and visualize geometric concepts through folding, tracing, and symmetry activities. This tool has been added as a non-embedded designated support for the Smarter Balanced Mathematics Assessment. And then just an important reminder for you this year, please ensure text-to-speech is disabled on all Chromebooks prior to test administration. And this is important as it could lead to invalidated tests if it is left available for students to access. So let's go ahead and dive into our next topic, which is achievement level descriptors. So starting with the 2025-26 CAASPP results, California has adopted new reporting achievement level descriptors and labels. These are designed to help students, their families, and the public better understand student performance on the summative English language, arts, and literacy, mathematics, and science assessments. So to be super clear, the standards and performance expectations have not changed. The test questions, format, scale scores, and cut scores for each level all remain the same. And because nothing else about the assessments has been changed, year-over-year results can still be compared. So taking a closer look, you can hopefully see the image there on the screen. Level 4 has moved from standard exceeded to advanced. Level 3 has moved from standard met to proficient. Level 2 has moved from standard nearly met to developing. And then lastly, level 1 has moved from standard not met to minimal. Now to align with the revisions to the overall ALDs, the performance area levels used to report results at the claim and domain levels have also been revised as follows. Once again, you can see the screen here. Above standard is now above proficient. Near standard is now at or near proficient. And then lastly, below standard is now below proficient. And to help communicate these changes, the CDE has launched an ALD communications toolkit specifically for coordinators and educators. The toolkit, located on the Reporting Achievement Level Descriptors webpage, provides relevant resources to students and families, educators, and LEA level and school level staff. And then once again, a link to the toolkit can be found on the resource guide. All right, hopefully the toolkit for you guys, the toolbox is coming together nicely. You're unfortunately not quite rid of me just yet. So we're going to move along here and talk about some updates to the ELA and Math summative assessments. As most of you are aware, the Smarter Balanced Assessment consists of a computer adaptive test, or lovingly known as the CAT, and then also a performance task, which we refer to as the PT. This year, California will be participating in a field test supporting a Smarter Balanced research study on student choice in performance task topics. The student choice field tests include English language arts performance tasks focused on 6th grade argumentative writing, and then also 8th grade mathematics performance tasks. So you might be asking yourself, what is a field test? Well, lucky for you, I have the information for you. A field test is a practice administration of new test items designed to evaluate their quality, fairness, and validity. So for the spring 2027 administration, a very small percentage of 6th and 8th grade students will receive the student choice performance task. And that essentially means that some of our students will receive a performance task that offers an initial topic choice item that asks the students to choose between 3 topics and then a 4th option that says, choose a topic for me. And then students not receiving the field test will receive the typical format for performance tasks. And then lastly, small updates, minor updates will be made to the scripts. And it's important to note TAs are not required to do anything different when administrating the performance tasks this year. And all performance tasks will be administered at the same time. All right. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciated the opportunity to chat with you this afternoon. And with that, I will pass it along to my awesome colleague in the science office, Erin Pecho, to hear about even more amazing tools and resources. Take it away, Erin.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott, for adding those valuable tools to our toolbox. Now I'll take it from here and walk us through our next set of essentials. The first tool I'd like to share is an update to the CAA for science. Starting with the 26-27 administration, all of the CAAs will be pre-equated. Equating is a process used to convert a student's raw score on an assessment to a scale score that then corresponds to an achievement level that LEAs and families see on their student score reports, or SSRs. Before the 2026-27 administration, the CAA for science was post-equated, meaning that the scale scores were not determined until after the test administration, which delayed the availability of SSRs for all of the CAAs. This means that the SSRs for all of the CAAs will now be available to LEAs earlier. The next tool is an update for CAST. Since the beginning of the operational assessment in the 2018-19 academic year, all students who took CAST were prompted with 3 to 4 survey questions at the end of CAST to gauge their experience with science learning. The survey results were used to plan professional learning for educators and help design classroom-relevant CAST practice and training tests. Over time, the overall survey results show the content of CAST matched the experiences students were receiving in their classrooms, so the survey became unnecessary. Starting with the 2026-27 administration, the student survey will be removed, and this will shorten the overall testing time for CAST. The link to the updated organization of the California Science Test Flyer can be found in your resource guide. And finally, I would like to share a powerful formative assessment tool for science. Through a collaborative effort with the Los Angeles County Office of Education, Authentic Tasks for Learning and Assessment in Science, or ATLAS, became live in January 2026. ATLAS is a free online bank of over 1,300 performance tasks for grades K-12. These authentic tasks engage students in sense-making and are aligned to the next generation science standards. Since its launch, ATLAS has seen over 14,000 new users and over 11,000 tasks downloaded. Educators can access ATLAS by visiting www.ngss-atlas.com. The link has also been provided to you in your resource guide. To better understand ATLAS as a tool in our toolbox, let's go through the platform and its features together. Right now, you are looking at the ATLAS homepage. To get here, I just typed www.ngss-atlas.com into the address bar. For the sake of this demonstration, I am taking on the role of a 5th grade teacher who is interested in a short life science performance task for my students. Once I am on the homepage, I can begin my search. To begin my search, I could use ATLAS's natural language search feature if I know the specific topic I want to teach. I could also start by selecting the grade level band I am interested in. Since I do not know the exact topic, but I do know my grade level, I will start there by selecting the 3 to 5 grade level band from the dropdown. I'll then click the forward arrow to show my results. What I'm looking at now are the search results. Each lesson is shown as a digital card with a picture, name of the task, a short description of the task, and task highlights, which are helpful for at-a-glance planning. On the left-hand side of the web page, there are filters. I will use these filters to narrow down my search results. So I did say I was a 5th grade teacher. The domain I'm looking for, I said life science. For task duration, I know I want a short one, so 0 to 30 minutes. And among other filters, I see student activities as part of the filters. I think I'm going to select making claims. My students have been practicing making claims in ELA and Math, and I think it would be helpful for them to practice this in science. I see 2 tasks that fit my criteria. This lesson is titled Growing Plants, and the summary reads, students investigate what plants need by analyzing experiment data on plants grown with or without water or soil, linking resources to growth. Once I get to the task page, I see more detailed information about the task and I'm able to access task materials. Here's what I notice. I notice the instructional materials listed. All tasks were selected to be a convenient part of your daily instruction. As such, tasks included in Atlas do not need expensive equipment or supplies to implement effectively. If anything, additional materials would not go beyond what teachers generally have access to in their classrooms on a regular basis. I notice a summary of the task. I notice the standards that the task addresses, which include the science and engineering practice, analyzing and interpreting data, the disciplinary core idea, LS1.C, from molecules to organisms, structures and processes, organization for matter and energy flow in organisms. The cross-cutting concept is patterns, and the performance expectation is 5LS1-1, which reads, support an argument that plants get their materials they need for growth chiefly from air and water. I noticed task features, which will help me pick the best task for my students. All tasks were independently evaluated before being included in Atlas and tagged based on what skills students are practicing during the task. For more information, I can click the small letter I icon, which reads Learn More, to learn more about the task features. I noticed the task documents. This includes being able to preview the student-facing handout and teacher preparation handout. You can click the black eye icon, which reads Preview Student Task and Preview Teacher Materials to view those files without having to download them. After reading about the task and previewing the task materials, I think this task fits my needs. From there, I can access all of the files and open the Google Drive folder with all the resources for this task. I can also copy the task to my own Google Drive, or I can download the task folder to my computer directly. I can also access the digital task from its original source. The task folders might contain even more task materials, including student-facing slide presentations and additional resources for my students. All of the steps I just walked you through can be done without logging into an Atlas account. An Atlas account is free and takes less than 30 seconds to set up. Once logged in, I would have access to even more features, including reading and leaving public reviews of the task, saving the task to my personal collection so I can keep tasks saved from year to year. I can also collaborate with colleagues and create a shared online discussion space for us to plan together and share implementation tips. Keep in mind that all teachers who want to form a collaborative group must have an Atlas account. Thank you for giving me the time to quickly go over how Atlas can support science instruction at your LEA. There's definitely more to learn, and I encourage you and your educators to explore independently and/or be on the lookout for Atlas professional learning opportunities hosted by the CDE during the 26-27 school year. All right, don't close that toolbox just yet. Our next presenter, Rebecca Bowers from the Interim and Formative Assessments Office, is ready to add a few more power tools to your collection.
Thank you so much, Aaron. So I will begin with an overview of California's assessment system, which is made up of 3 main components, each aligned with the state standards designed to support college and career readiness. In addition to the summative assessments, which we just heard some about, the system includes interim assessments as well as formative assessment resources that are housed in tools for teachers. The resources and data from each of these components are intended to support teaching and learning. During the next part of our presentation, we will focus on the interim assessments. The CDE offers interim assessments for 4 content areas: Smarter Balance ELA, Smarter Balance Math, CAASPP, and ELPAC. This school year, there continue to be 3 types of Smarter Balance interim assessments available for grades 3 through 8 and high school for ELA and Math. The interim comprehensive assessments, or ICAs, cover the broadest content, most similar to the Smarter Balance summative assessments. Note that California continues to use the adjusted blueprint for the summative assessments, so the ICA is longer than the summative assessments. The interim assessment blocks, or IABs, focus on a smaller set of related concepts. And the focused IABs, or interim assessment blocks, assess even smaller sets of content, generally 1 to 3 assessment targets. Smarter Balance continues to add to the repository of ELA and Math interim assessments each year. For the 2026-27 school year, there are 156 ELA and 107 Math interim assessments to choose from, which includes several new forms. For ELA, there are 2 new focused IABs for each of grades 3 through 8 and high school. For each grade, one of the new forms focuses on word meaning and language use for reading literary texts, and the other focuses on word meaning and language use for reading informational texts. For high school, the performance task that was used in both the ICA and the IAB has been replaced. And for Math, the 7th grade performance task has also been replaced for both the ICA and the IAB. Now, switching from the Smarter Balance interim assessments to the CAASPP interim assessments, there continues to be 18 CAASPP interim assessment forms to choose from. There are 2 forms for each of grades 3, 4, and 5, 6 forms for middle school, and 6 forms for high school. For grades 3, 4, and 5, the CAASPP interim assessments are organized by grade level performance expectations, and all 3 science domains are assessed within the interim assessment for each grade. For the 6 middle and 6 high school forms, the CAASPP interim assessments are organized by science domain. The domains are Earth and Space Sciences, Life Sciences, and Physical Sciences. There are also 56 ELPAC interim assessments to choose from. The ELPAC interim assessments are organized by domain with the same grade levels and grade spans as the summative ELPAC. The domains are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. In the grade levels, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and grade spans 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 and 10, and 11 and 12. The 56 ELPAC interim assessments consist of 2 forms for each grade level or grade span and domain: listening, reading, or speaking, reading, and writing. Now I'll share key considerations for using the CAASPP and ELPAC interim assessments. First off, the interim assessments are optional assessments that are available year-round and can be used quite flexibly. They can be administered in either a standardized manner, like a benchmark assessment, or in a non-standardized manner, as part of a formative assessment during classroom instruction. If your educators are planning to use the interim assessments, we strongly encourage providing them with the appropriate TOMS roles at the beginning of the school year. This way, they can dive right in and begin using the resources available to them. I'll say more about this in just a moment. This recommendation applies to tools for teachers as well, because both of these resources are available year-round, so providing early access is key. The interim assessments are also secure assessments, meaning only LEA staff and students are permitted to access them. It is important that educators maintain interim assessment test security by following the guidelines outlined in the Sample Interim Assessment Test Security Agreement. This includes not recording, emailing, texting, or posting content in any online system, messaging platform, or artificial intelligence tool. While it is not a state requirement that LEA staff sign the Interim Assessment Security Agreement, it is recommended that LEA leadership have staff read and sign the agreement prior to accessing the interim assessments, and signed agreements be maintained in their local records. Another key consideration is that California law prohibits the use of interim assessments for any high-stakes decisions, such as teacher evaluation, grade promotion or retention, or reclassification of English learners. California Education Code Section 60642.7b provides additional examples of prohibited use. And now the final point I'd like to make on this slide is that multiple measures should be used in determining where students are at in their learning. So performance on the interim assessment should not be the sole measure of students' proficiency. Now, as a reminder, the TOMS Interim Assessment Administrator only role can be assigned to a user at the school level and has many access permissions, including access to the test delivery system, the interim assessment viewing system, the completion status system, the teacher hand scoring system, the data entry interface, the California Educator Reporting System, and access to tools for teachers. So this role provides access to a lot of important systems and resources, which is why it's important to establish these roles for teachers and administrators early on in the school year. Beginning this school year, the interim assessment reporting labels were updated to align with the achievement level descriptors that were introduced for the spring 2026 summative assessment results. Specifically, the descriptors for the ICAs match those of the summative assessments: advanced, proficient, developing, and minimal. And the descriptors for Smarter Balance IABs, focused IABs, and CAST interim assessments have three updated category labels: above proficient, at or near proficient, and below proficient. CDE also provides many tools and supports to assist educators in their use and implementation of the interim assessments, which include the CAASPP and ELPAC interim assessment lookup tool, the interim assessment viewing system, the interim assessment user guide, and the interim assessment video series. Direct links to these key resources are located in your resource guide. Now, let's switch gears a little and focus on updates in the area of formative assessment, which occurs during instruction and provides timely feedback to inform further planning. The formative assessment component of California's comprehensive system of assessments is Tools for Teachers. Tools for Teachers is an online collection of high-quality, standards-aligned instructional and professional learning resources that are grounded in the formative assessment process and are free to all California K-12 public school educators. Instructional resources or lesson plans contain step-by-step directions and embedded formative assessment and accessibility strategies that teachers can use with students to support learning in ELA, math, and science. There are also professional learning resources available on Tools for Teachers on a variety of different topics, but I'll highlight the most recent additions, which are the ELPAC professional learning resources. There are 19 professional learning resources which focus specifically on how educators can become familiar with ELPAC task types and how to provide needed support for students who are English learners. These resources support the use of the ELPAC interim assessments. All of the professional learning resources can be used by a facilitator with a group of educators, or educators can do the activities on their own. The resources all have an emphasis on the formative assessment process and cover topics that help educators understand the tools, resources, and assessments available to them. Over the last several months, over 130 new instructional resources or lesson plans have been added to the Tools for Teachers website. Authors include the Smarter Balance State Network of Educators, including 35 educators from California. This year, for the very first time, ELA and math lessons are being added for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, as well as corresponding connections playlists. The lessons and playlists will be added in the coming weeks, so make sure to check out the assessment spotlight for the official announcement. New this year, ELA and math lesson plans include English learner strategies as well. The English learner strategies are a subset of accessibility strategies that specifically support the development of the English language. The Tools for Teachers resources page on the CAASPP and ELPAC website also hosts various resources to assist in the formative assessment process. These resources include training videos, flyers, and other online formative assessment tools. Links to these resources can be found in your resource guide. The CDE sponsors a variety of trainings throughout the school year to support understanding and use of the CAASPP and ELPAC interim assessments and tools for teachers. So hang in there to hear a few of the exciting upcoming training opportunities that are available. One training to share with your colleagues is the Interim and Formative Assessment webinar series, which consists of live webinars focused on the interim and formative components of the CAASPP and ELPAC assessment systems. This is our second year featuring an educator panel as part of the series for representatives from LEAs across the state to share their experiences and best practices in a conversational format. The summer sessions have concluded and registration has just opened for the fall webinar sessions, which begin on September 15th. The next training we'd like to make sure that you have on your radar is the SIRS Essentials Training Series. This new online training series, which kicks off next Wednesday, August 19th, runs throughout the school year and provides timely opportunities for teachers and administrators to develop a shared understanding of state assessment data and build confidence in using the reporting system. There are 8 sessions in this series, with each session at 1 hour and focused on a specific SIRS-related topic to give educators more flexibility and choice than SIRS trainings in previous years. We encourage teachers and administrators to attend together as a team to receive practical tips and takeaways that they can begin using immediately to work with student data and to allow for stronger data conversations. SIRS also has some really great recent updates that you'll want to hear about later in the system enhancements part of today's agenda, so stay tuned to hear more. And finally, we'd like to highlight the CDE-hosted Site Administrator Assessment Convenings, which are 1-hour webinars that provide site administrators with the opportunity to learn about assessment resources offered by the CDE, ask questions, and share ideas with other site administrators throughout the state. The Site Administrator Assessment Convenings are this month and in January. The August Site Administrator Convenings will be held August 19th and 25th. The 2 convenings within each month contain the same content, so administrators can select whichever session works best for them. A link to the registration web pages for all of these opportunities is provided in your resource guide. So please share these opportunities and the links to register with teachers and administrators at your sites. Also, in early 2027, the CDE will host the Formative Assessment Shared Practices webinar series, consisting of 3 webinars. This series offers a unique opportunity to hear from California educators and how they promote and use formative assessment tools and resources locally. Staff in your district can learn and hear tips from California educators, administrators, and test coordinators, and even ask them questions. The 3 webinars will focus on flexible practices for formative assessment, actionable support for diverse learners, and using interim assessments formatively. More details to come.
Now it's time for our Q&A section, and we're going to take about 15 minutes to answer any of your questions, and hopefully you'll walk away with some tools. All right, we're going to have a couple of CDE managers, and they're going to be here to help you answer those questions.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. I'm Judy Yang. I'm the manager of the ELA and Math office. So I will be answering some of your questions on accessibility. One of the questions that came to us was, will there be a time when other languages besides Spanish will be available? We have many other languages spoken in our schools. So we are part of the Smarter Balance Consortium. And so the Smarter Balance Consortium conducts a language survey across all member states and work on providing new languages. But currently, Spanish is the only language being translated in the test delivery system for math and science. Next question, why do Chromebooks need to have speech-to-text disabled? And then we have the same one, how do students access that if it's an accommodation, you turn off the Chrome to speech. So it's necessary to turn off the text to speech in the Chromebook because it's outside of the application of the secure browser. So but if a student is assigned the embedded text to speech, it will appear inside the test delivery system. So there's two different text to speech. So it is not needed to be on if they're using a Chromebook. And again, this is only for the Chromebooks. Next question, was the matrix updated since the 26-27 school year and available for download? The answer is yes. The matrix is available on the accessibility resource webpage on the CAASPP and ELPAC website. It is also in our resource guide. And what assessment does Patty paper apply to? It only applies to the Smart Balanced Math Assessment, and it is available for all grades. I'm going to pass it next to our consultant in my office, Devin Triplett.
Thank you, Judy. Hi, everybody. Good to see such a great turnout today. Thank you for taking time to come and talk assessments with us. Okay, so I'm going to answer some of the questions that were sent in regarding English and math assessments. The first question is, when will the 2025-26 CAASPP and ELPAC scores be available to the public? Well, the CAASPP and ELPAC aggregate results will be made available to the public along with the release of the California School Dashboard on October 15th, 2026. There will also be an LEA preview of assessment results in September, and also a final LEA preview 24 hours prior to the public release. Superintendents, charter school administrators, and LEA coordinators will be emailed preview access just prior to each preview. Okay, so now we're going to talk field test items for a little bit. This is mainly in regards to the student choice field test, but it also applies to general field testing as well. For many folks who might be new to the concept of field testing is when there is an item on the test that we need to gather data on and before it can become operational, or in the case of the student choice field test, we are gathering data to determine more information about this type of item. Field test items, because they do not have validity data on them yet, they cannot be reported as part of a student's score because they are not yet operational items. But field testing is very necessary in order to keep a healthy item pool and to keep test development moving forward. So will students be scored on the field test PTs? So because these items don't have data on them yet, students cannot receive a WER score on these field test items. And so students who are assigned the student choice field test, similar to any other embedded field test performance task, they do not receive a writing score on their essay score on their student score report. How much time can we expect the field test questions to take in addition to the current test? It'll be the same. Basically, the field test will be replaced by the, or the performance task will be replaced by the embedded field test. And how will we know if our district will be receiving the field test items? You won't. Part of one of the criteria of field testing is that students don't know that they're taking a field test. That's what helps keep it valid. So students won't know, and you won't know as a test administrator. The instructions for all students will be the same. And so the process will be the same as well. You'll just administer the CAT and you'll administer the PT and just as you would for any other year. Will there be a way for districts or individual students to opt out of the field test? No, there is not, because students won't know that they're taking a field test. And there was a question, what is meant by all PTs will be administered at the same time? Well, that goes back to what I said. There's really nothing different that you will need to do, because the instructions for the field test will be built into the testing script as is. So there's nothing different, just administer the CAT and PT like you would any other year. And I think I've spoken to the scoring aspect. Again, if a student is assigned a field test, they won't have a WER score on their score report or in the data file. However, students who receive an embedded field test performance task, so those students receive a separate blueprint that has a few more items in the computer adaptive test. So those students still do receive a valid score, and so they receive an overall score, they receive an overall level, they receive composite claim scores, and they'll receive a Lexile measure. Their scores can be used for public reporting, for the dashboard. So everything else is valid about the student's score. And I think that concludes. Will there be any changes to the student score data file layout? No, because we already do have a field test identifier in there. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to the science office, either Christy or Aaron. Thanks all.
Thanks, Devin. My name is Christy Pellerin. I'm the manager of the science office, and we have two questions to answer for you guys for our science. So the first question is super exciting. It is about our new feature, Atlas. And the question is, in the Atlas system, it looks like there is a login button in the top corner. Do you need an account to access? No, you do not need an account to access Atlas. It is a free online resource for educators, and you don't have to log in order to access any of the tasks or the task materials. However, there is an opportunity for users to create an account, and this will expand their access to other features. Some of the features that you get if you do create an account include, but not limited to, reading and leaving public comments for the task themselves, creating a personal collection to save tasks so that you can use it year after year, and also creating a shared online space for you and your colleagues to collaborate. This could be a space where you guys plan out different types of lessons to use and also share some implementation tips. So the account is not required, but there are a lot of features that come with it that might be handy. The second question that we have is asking about why the grade 5 CAASPP interim assessments are not broken down by domain. And it continues that this would help to align items with the CAAs and allow their teams to create better alignment to administer. So I'm going to answer these two separate questions. The first question is the grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5 CAASPP interim assessments are not domain specific. They do include grade level content in earth and space sciences, life sciences, and physical sciences from grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5 next generation science standards. During the development of the CAASPP IAs, the CDE did conduct an outreach investigation, and it showed that the instructional scope and sequence varies greatly across the state. The order and the combination of the performance expectations has significant variation from district to district, even when looking at the LEAs with the same overall model. The format of the CAASPP IAs were then developed to meet the needs of all the students in California, as well as all of the educators. And the second question, at this time, there are currently no CAA for science interim assessments available, and there's no current plan to produce those. And that's it from the science office. So I'm going to pass this on to the interim and formative assessment office.
Thank you, Christy. Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Valdez. I'm the manager of the interim and formative assessments office at the CDE. And I'm going to continue to expand upon the available science resources. We did receive a question about whether there are science resources available on the Tools for Teachers website, and the answer is yes. There are 92 science instructional resources available on the Tools for Teachers website. The instructional resources essentially are lesson plans. They are aligned with the next generation science standards. There are resources available for kindergarten through high school. In Tools for Teachers, and always like to promote the fact that the instructional resources in Tools for Teachers particularly for science, were created by California science educators. So we're excited to have that resource available with science resources, English language arts instructional resources, and mathematics instructional resources. Of course, as well as the ELPAC instructional resources that you heard about from Rebecca. We did also receive a question about how the ELPAC professional learning resources can be accessed in Tools for Teachers. So while we have instructional resources for ELA, Math, and Science in Tools for Teachers, for ELPAC, we have professional learning resources. And in order to access those ELPAC professional learning resources, you will log in to Tools for Teachers, and you will sign in. Every California public school educator can get a free account. Most can get a free account just by self-registration, creating their own account. And after you log in the left-hand menu of Tools for Teachers is a button for professional learning resources or professional learning. And once you select that button, that will take you to the professional learning resources page where you can search for the keyword ELPAC. And that will bring up those ELPAC resources that Rebecca mentioned earlier. So I'm going to move over now to a couple of questions that we received specific to the interim assessments. And we did receive a question specific to the ELA interim assessments and a question about the availability or the possibility of administering one of the ELA performance tasks separate from the interim comprehensive assessment. So again, the interim comprehensive assessment is the essentially meant to be the full form of the Smarter Balanced ELA assessment. And there are two parts to the ICA. There is a performance task, and then there is just the general computer-based items. So the performance task that appears on the ELA interim comprehensive assessment is also available as a standalone interim assessment block. So for example, in grade 8 for English language arts, the performance task is titled Women in Space. And that same performance task appears both on the interim comprehensive assessment and as a standalone interim assessment block. So if it's administered as part of the interim assessment block, the teacher can get results just for that performance task. If it is administered as part of the interim comprehensive assessment, it's important to know that in order to get a score for the student on the interim comprehensive assessment, both parts of the ICA must be administered, both the performance task and the general computer-based items. We did receive a second question about the interim assessments. How can we get our school district to participate in the interim assessments? First, want to just restate that the interim assessments are available to any local educational agency staff member with an appropriate role in the Test Operations Management System, or TOMS. The TOMS roles are assigned usually by the district CAASPP coordinator or the district ELPAC coordinator. So we really encourage the district test coordinators to assign those TOMS roles as early in the school year as possible. As Rebecca mentioned earlier, the interim assessments for this school year, the CAASPP and ELPAC interim assessments for this school year, became available earlier this month. And so we would encourage those TOMS roles to be assigned as soon as possible for access. Now, if you are looking for tips or ideas for using the interim assessments locally, or just building motivation to introduce the interim assessments locally, the California Department of Education does sponsor webinars each year that are advertised as shared practices sessions. And they can offer some really great ideas of how different school districts across the state are using the interim assessments. One of the webinars, it's coming up, and it's probably going to be a few months from now, and that is one of the webinars that Rebecca mentioned earlier. It's part of the Shared Practices webinar series, and it will be focusing on using interim assessments formatively. And so the webinars like that, we have several recordings available from past Shared Practices webinars, and would encourage you to consider watching the recordings if you're looking for specific ideas for implementing interim assessments locally. And then just a couple of questions regarding, came into us regarding CERS, which is the California Educator Reporting System. There is one question about the availability of claim and domain reports. Claim and domain reports compare domain level performance for certain assessments. And the question is about how to generate the report. They were receiving a message that there are no available tests. So I'm not sure which subject area this question was specific to, but if there are available results for the science, the CAST, and the ELPAC summative assessments, the report will generate. I do want to point out that for the Smarter Balanced summative assessments, several years ago, we did switch to using the adjusted blueprint, which is a shorter blueprint. And so that shorter blueprint does not produce claim results for individual students because there are not enough items on the test to generate claim reports for individual students. And then the very last question that came into us, this is also regarding CERS, is there a way to view results or filter results to identify or to view results specifically for students with disabilities? And the answer, in short, is no. But I did want to explain why that is. It really goes back to the requirements of our Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which does prohibit the display of personally identifiable information. So one of the protected groups are students with disabilities. Other groups that are protected, so you will not see filters in CERS, are for foster and homeless, excuse me, as well as free and reduced meal participation. So those are the questions that came in for our office. And now I think we're maybe ready to circle back to see if there are any other questions.
Hey, Jessica, yeah, we're going to go ahead and move on. So thank you everyone for submitting those questions. And next up, I would like to welcome Erica Fredrickson from the English Language Proficiency and Spanish Assessments Office.
Thanks, Paul. So it's my turn to pick it up from here so that you can add a few more key tools to that toolbox. As Paul said, I'm Erica Fredrickson, and it is my pleasure to present a few updates to the California Spanish Assessment, or the CSA. So you can consider the topics that we cover in this session today as tools you can add to your professional toolbox, each one designed to support your work with multilingual learners. Let's talk about the CSA and biliteracy. The CSA, as one of the key tools in that toolbox, is part of the CAASPP system of assessment and is available to students at no cost. The California State Seal of Biliteracy is a valuable recognition that multilingual students can earn through multiple pathways. Now that the high school CSA includes all domains of communication, it can be used as a locally approved Spanish language proficiency assessment to meet, in part, the State Seal of Biliteracy requirement. LEAs may choose the CSA as the district-approved assessment option 4 to meet the World Language Assessment requirement. And you can refer to the resource link in your guide for more information. Okay, from here, we're ready to layer on the changes to the CSA test configuration. The CSA has added a new segment. However, the length and the number of items on the assessment remains unchanged. The full write item, where students read a passage and are asked to respond to a writing prompt, is now its own segment. This segment is at the very end of the test and will no longer have pause rules. This means students will be able to return to their writing response after a pause of more than 20 minutes or in a new test session, similar to the CAASPP English Language Arts and Literacy Performance Task. This segment should be administered in a single sitting, and test administrators should plan appropriately based on the time recommended in the Preparing for Administration or PFA document. If some students are unable to complete during this time, follow the guidelines on pausing. Note that a new session needs to be opened if it is not completed on the same day. Finally, as a reminder, students will not be able to review previously completed test items once they move on from each segment. Okay, now it's time for ELPAC updates. Here are a few practical tools and efficiencies you can take advantage of this year. We have some initial ELPAC and initial alternate ELPAC certification and administration changes for you. First, let's help you make the most of existing resources. For the initial ELPAC, LEAs may reuse non-scannable materials, such as printed directions for administration or DFAs, and answer books for the 2026-2027 administration, if they were printed during the 2025-26 administration, and if they are not participating in the rotating score validation process, also known as RSVP. For the initial alternate ELPAC, LEAs may also reuse printed DFAs, picture cards, and test item preview booklets. We have some good news to share. Since the initial ELPAC hasn't changed since the 2025-26 administration, returning LEA coordinators who already certified last year can keep that certification tool in place. You don't need to go back and redo the certification training this year as long as you complete the verification process. This saves LEA coordinators valuable time. However, please remember that for any new LEA coordinators, certification is still an essential tool they'll need to add to their toolbox. So new coordinators must complete certification for the 2026-27 administration to ensure they're fully prepared. And as always, annual training remains an essential tool to build your administration with precision, ensuring consistency. Test examiners must annually complete training in Moodle for the initial ELPAC and the initial alternate ELPAC prior to administering the test. Here's a brand new tool for your toolbox, the ELPAC Resources at a Glance. This document describes online resources available from the CDE to assist educators with instruction, assessment administration, scoring, reporting, and instructional planning. Educators can use this document to select the best resources based on their specific needs. This document can be found on the ELPAC pages of the CAASPP and ELPAC website and is also linked in your resource guide. You asked, we listened. We're excited to introduce a new supplemental resource for local ELPAC training, similar to what we previously provided for CAASPP. One of the most common requests we've heard from LEAs is for a ready-to-use supplemental training resource to support local ELPAC and alternate ELPAC test examiner training. While this slide deck is an excellent supplemental resource for local training, it does not replace the required Moodle calibration training for test examiners who administer and score the speaking and writing domains as applicable. This new slide deck includes the following sections: ELPAC overview, test security, accessibility resources, preparing for, during, and after ELPAC testing, ELPAC pause rules, technology needed for test administration, security incidents and cheating, preparing students with practice tests, training tests, and ELPAC interim assessment. We hope this new resource makes preparing your test examiners a little easier, and helps support successful ELPAC administration in your LEA. Thank you for continuing to share your feedback with us. Your suggestions are helping us shape the resources we create. And in an effort to make it both easier to find and use key resources, we've reorganized some of our toolboxes, specifically the 2026-27 Online Test Administration Manuals, also known as the OTAM. To improve navigation, we have, in the ELPAC OTAM, elevated the teacher hand scoring system and scoring from being a subsection in the Administering to Students chapter to being its own chapter with its own navigation panel. Likewise, for our alternate ELPAC OTAM, we relocated the Using the Data Entry interface for second scoring in the Administering a Computer-Based Test Session subsection to be its own section of Administering to Students chapter with a dedicated tab. Next, let's discuss the new and refurbished tools in the ELPAC Information Guide. For instance, we have clarified language regarding changing the Home Language Survey, or HLS, before initial ELPAC testing and correcting the English Language Acquisition Status, or ELAS, after testing for initial identification. We also provide clearer guidance on the timeframe for release of all ELPAC results to parents and guardians. In addition, we have a new section explaining when summative results may be used for reclassification. We've also refined a few key components within the guide to make them more effective. For example, we revised the ELPAC domain exemption decision-making tool and enhanced the domain exemption section to align with changes in TOMS, which now requires justifications and rationales for each exemption. Based on feedback from the field, we also added a new section on how to support students who have speech and language sound considerations under the Assessing Students with Disabilities for English Language Proficiency chapter. And in the Administration for Students with Disabilities section, you will find guiding questions to support accessibility resource considerations by domain in a new subsection called Considerations for IEP or Section 504 Plan Team Discussion. We also expanded the summative alternate ELPAC participation subsection regarding when the lowest obtainable scale score is applied to results in order to be consistent with the summative ELPAC participation subsection. Finally, we included information and guidance on what should be kept electronically or printed for a student's cumulative folder in the Reporting and Using Individual Results chapter under Timeframe for Reporting Summative Results to Families subsection. We like to think of this guide as a micro tool chest within your larger toolbox. So with that, I will pass that toolbox over to Dr. Jessica Jennings to continue building on this work.
Thank you so much, Erica. As just mentioned, my name is Dr. Jessica Jennings, and I'm excited to be here today at the start of a new school year. Now that we've learned about a few of the new and refurbished tools in our tool chest, let's transition to updates to the assessments themselves. First, let's start with an exciting announcement regarding the summative alternate ELPAC. The in-test survey segments, both at the beginning and the end of the summative alternate ELPAC, have been removed to streamline administration. That's right. Now less time is required for our TEs to prepare for and administer the summative alternate ELPAC. As noted in the previous updates to the ELPAC information guide slide, this year we're adding more precision to how one of our tools is used in the Test Operations Management System, or TOMS. As a way to help LEA's Individualized Education Program, or IEP plan teams, and Section 504 plan teams make annual decisions about domain exemptions, we will now require student educators to identify, select, and report the justification for all domain exemptions. By collecting this information in TOMS, LEAs can better track domain exemption assignments and justifications, while ensuring that IEP teams and Section 504 plan teams are using allowable reasons or rationales for domain exemptions. The pre-identified justifications for a domain exemption are included in TOMS, in the ELPAC information guide, and in the updated domain exemption decision-making tool. Alternately, an LEA may also identify a unique rationale for a domain exemption that is not pre-identified by CDE, that clearly articulates how the student's disability precludes them from accessing the domain. In this case, the LEA will enter their own rationale as an other justification. We know you've all been monitoring Assembly Bill 2555, which updates the criteria and process for reclassifying English learners in California public schools. But it still has not passed the legislature. When and if it passes, we will provide communication regarding updates to the reclassification criteria and process. As we wrap up this section, we hope you're leaving with a stronger, more organized toolbox for both ELPAC and CSA, filled with practical tools you can put to work right away. Okay, now let's move on to system updates to our system tools, specifically latest enhancements. In October 2026, alongside the public release of results, the test results for California Assessment's website will also be updated with the following enhancements. For all ELPAC assessments, the colors on the donut charts on the at-a-glance pages and the grade level reports will transition to new colors that allow for improved contrast and accessibility. For the smarter balanced summative assessments in ELA and mathematics, as well as the CAASPP, various reports and pages throughout the website will be updated to include the revised reporting ALDs and labels approved by the State Board of Education. The revised ALDs will apply to all results beginning with the 25-26 administration. Results prior to the 25-26 will still be associated with the previous reporting ALDs. Enhancements will also include other minor technical edits to improve the clarity of contextual help, text, and system messages in certain places. Let's now discuss a few refurbished tools in the Test Delivery System, or TDS. In the TDS student platform, you will notice new color backgrounds and headers have been added to differentiate between the practice tests and the operational tests. Green headers indicate a practice test session, while blue headers indicate an operational test session. This change will help decrease the number of TAs or TEs that accidentally access the summative assessments. Another TDS update is to the audio player for ELA and CSA, which has been updated to allow students to drag the cursor to different sections of the audio file. This will allow students to monitor audio playback, encourage better time management, and reduce anxiety during audio-based tasks. Now let's move on to the Test Information Distribution Engine, or TIDE, also known as the Completion Status System. An exciting update is to the user-specific time zones. Going forward, reports will contain user-specific local time information on reports generated where times are present. Another improvement is to add persistent table customization settings in saved searches. So when the search table is customized, for example, a default column selections and heading order, the user will be able to save it to favorites for reuse. A final update for TIDE will allow users to search for students by typing in a student's partial name. We're now going to transition to the Test Operations Management System, or TOMS. The TOMS updates apply to the Security and Test Administration Incident Reporting System, also known as STARS. The STARS system in TOMS is used to report testing and incidents that occurred during the administration of the computer-based assessments and paper pencil or PPTs for both CAASPP and ELPAC. Due to the increased number of test security cases involving students utilizing artificial intelligence or AI platforms, AI-specific language has been added to the STARS system. Any issue of a student utilizing AI during testing will now be classified as a breach that LEAs must input STARS and input these cases within 24 hours. Now let's take a moment to highlight a few enhancements to the California Educator Reporting System, or CERS. We'll begin with improved accessibility enhancements throughout CERS that assist with visibility, ease of navigation, and provide screen reader support. In addition, the redesigned homepage and header bar now has a handy help menu with links to the CERS user guide, the CERS interpretive guide, and the CERS resources webpage. Another enhancement is easier assessment selection, enabling educators to quickly find an assessment in a group view with additional filters and a more organized layout. And finally, there is now a new export for interim assessment student responses, allowing educators to use the results by item view to export students' responses for an item or for the entire interim assessment. And I saw that heart. Yeah, let's give us some more love there, right? Yeah. Okay. To learn more about CERS and the recent enhancements, check out the CERS resources webpage, or better yet, join us at one of the training opportunities for CERS that Becky mentioned earlier in today's presentation. Just a reminder that CERS Essential registration is still open. There's a link for the registration page in your resource guide. Okay, everyone, don't close that toolbox just yet. Our next presenter, Don Kilmer, will now walk us through all the essentials and tools needed for the California High School Equivalency and Proficiency programs. Don?
Thanks, Jessica, for that introduction. I'm the administrator of the Proficiency, Equivalency, and Fitness Testing Office at the California Department of Education and the California State GED and HiSET Administrator. Today, I will address several questions we've heard lately regarding eligibility for the California High School Equivalency and Proficiency programs, as well as what students or test takers can do after they pass. Let me start with an overview of the California Proficiency Program, also known as HiSET Proficiency. Eligibility for the proficiency exam is in two parts. Part one, is the student 16 years of age, or are they enrolled in the second semester of their second year of high school, or have they completed at least 1 year of their second year of high school? Part two, is the student subject to California compulsory education laws? Meaning, are they attending a public high school, a private school in California, or do they possess a California work permit issued by the California Department of Industrial Relations and are working in California or for a California production company? This is the work permit for actors, artists, and/or performers, and is not the work permit that's approved by the principal of your local high school so that you can work after school or on a weekend job. If the student has met the eligibility part one and eligibility part two, they are eligible to take the California Proficiency Test. The Proficiency Test is available through only HiSET. Let's look at how they are scored. To obtain the California Proficiency Program certificate, they must score at least 15 out of 20 in each of the three subtests, reading, writing, and mathematics, and a minimum writing score of over 4 out of 6. The student must also obtain at least 45 out of the possible 60 total points available. The California High School Equivalency Program is offered to students who are currently not enrolled in high school or at least 18 years of age or 17 years of age under certain circumstances. For example, if a student is someone in a credit recovery program or if they are institutionalized or incarcerated. Based on those eligibility requirements, a student may currently be enrolled in high school and take the high school equivalency tests. The equivalency tests are available through one of our two partners with the California Department of Education, GED or HiSET. Let's look at how they are scored. Students who take the GED must score at least a 145 on each of the 4 subtests with a minimum total of 580 for all subtests. Students who pass the HiSET must pass each of the 5 subtests with at least an 8 with a minimum total score of 45. After passing the California Proficiency Program, students are eligible to exit high school and attend California Community College, a California State College, or a California State University. Students who pass the high school proficiency program and are minors must get their parents' or guardians' permission to exit from high school. Just because a student has passed and received a certificate of proficiency does not mean they must disenroll from high school. Exiting high school is the choice of the student and or parent or guardian. Students who pass the California Proficiency Program may be eligible to attend other private colleges and universities, but this is on a case-by-case basis. And it is recommended that the student check with the registrar of that institution before disenrolling from high school, as private institutions are not required by law to recognize the proficiency certificate. After passing the California High School Equivalency Program, students are eligible to attend any community college, state university, or state college. The California High School Equivalency Certificate is accepted in nearly all state colleges and universities worldwide, but like proficiency test, it is encouraged that the student check with the registrar before attempting to enroll. The California Proficiency Certificate, as well as the California Equivalency Certificate, by law, are equivalent to a high school diploma issued by the state of California. Thank you for your time. Please welcome our next presenter, who will add to our toolbox about the National Assessment on Educational Progress, or NAEP. Our NAEP coordinator is Krista Poole.
Thank you for the introduction, Don. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon and provide an update about the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. Like Don said, I'm the California's NAEP state coordinator. Every state has one, and for California, that is me. NAEP is oftentimes referred to as the nation's report card. So if you know it by the nation's report card, that's the same thing. That's just interchangeably used. And there is a link to the Nation's Report Card website in your resource guide if you'd like to continue to explore some of the tools available there after I talk about NAEP for a few minutes here. Just a little preview, some tools are going to include things like reports, news articles, data dashboards, and then the NAEP question tool, which will allow you to view publicly released items in a digital pop quiz format, which is really neat. So you can use it with students, or you can use it just to kind of preview what NAEP looks like. So I want to start by kind of level setting here and providing an overview of NAEP because some may be unfamiliar. But NAEP was adopted by Congress almost 60 years ago with the goal being results that provide a comprehensive measure of student achievement across the United States. NAEP is the largest nationally representative assessment of what students across the United States know and can do. So we get to compare essentially apples to apples with the same assessment questions, which is very different from state testing, which all states develop and score on their own. So who is running this program? The National Assessment Governing Board, or NAGB, sets NAEP policy and frameworks, and the National Center for Education Statistics, or NCES, will oversee the program. And then again, each state has a coordinator, and for California, that is me. Another big difference between CAASPP and any state test and NAEP is that NAEP is a sample. So I really want to
emphasize that it's a sample. So NCES selects a sample of schools and students in California that is representative, again, representative, a sample of the whole population of California students and schools. And this is why it's not uncommon for administrators that I speak to sometimes to be unfamiliar with the program. Very few schools are selected for NAEP each cycle, and this is very different from state testing. So I do regularly speak to administrators who are new to NAEP, and that's okay. I am here to help. Now, everyone is always interested in the selection process of the representative sample. So the selection process by NCES is based on school size, location, demographics, achievement, and among several other things. But CDE has no say in which schools get selected, who's sampled, who is asked to participate for the assessments for NAEP. Some assessments are tied to Title I assurances, while other assessments in other subjects are voluntary, and that's just going to be dependent on the year and which assessment your site gets selected for, if your site gets selected to participate. Part of my job is to encourage participation for all assessments across the board. Another really important part that everyone asks about is results. I know that that's, a topic of interest when it comes to all assessments. But in terms of results may allow policymakers and educators to say a lot about groups of students, but nothing about individual students, individual schools, or most districts, except for LAUSD and San Diego USD, who participate in our TUTA program, and they get district level results, but everyone else, no individual level scores results at all. It's just telling us information about groups of students specifically. So really important question, what's being tested for NAEP 2026-2027? So for NAEP 2026-27 administration year, it's what's considered a small NAEP year. Last year was a really big NAEP year. So the only subject being tested is science, and the only grade being tested is grade 8. So if your district or your school was selected to participate, you should have already been notified by me via email. Communication about NAEP will come directly from me at kpol@cde.ca.gov, and I'll also CC our NAEP email, so naep@cde.ca.gov, NAEP. And district assessment coordinators and district technology directors are going to be CC'd on all NAEP communications at school sites, because I will need your help with some things if your school gets selected to participate under a school device model, which most schools are going to be selected to participate under this time around. The subject of the letter that you would have received from me via email is notification of district selection of the National Assessment of Educational Progress 2026-2027. And the letter with the CDE letterhead is displayed here on the screen for you with the subject line in bold. So changes this year to NAEP for schools that have been selected to participate, and for all future NAEP years for schools that get selected to participate in the future, is the account activation process for the assessment management system. So the assessment management system is the online system that we use for NAEP to complete tasks for NAEP that are required prior to the actual date of assessment. So account activation will now require an active login.gov account for authentication purposes and to better comply with the Federal Information Security Modernization Act guidelines. Sorry, that's a lot. That's what we have to comply to at this point. So signing into the assessment management system will now require school teams to click on the sign in with login.gov, which is the white button at the bottom here. Directions for creating a login.gov account or applying login.gov credentials that you may already have to your assessment management system account will be emailed to you if you need them, and also included under the link that's shown here, which is review account activation instructions and FAQs on the login page. But if you need assistance, please, you can always get in touch with me and I can help troubleshoot with you. So like I mentioned, schools selected to take part in NAEP Science this school year have already been notified. If your district has been asked to participate, here's a timeline of important communication and tasks that are upcoming. So the school technology survey I have already sent out and should have been responded to by July 17th. And I think I only had one school that did not meet that deadline, and I will reach out to them directly. But it's really important if you do get selected in future years to complete the school technology survey in time, because it does allow us to move forward with the device model that best fits the needs of your school site. And it just helps us to determine which technology availability your school site has. The subject of this email was called NAEP 2027 School Technology Survey Notification. Once I have the information from the school technology survey, districts and their schools will be asked to identify an application installer, which is the step that I am in right now. Oftentimes, this has been the district technology director The application installer is who I'm going to communicate with to ensure all devices are ready with the eNAEP application installed. It's kind of like the CAASPP secure browser, and that's if sites are selected for the school device model. A link to the eNAEP download center is in your resource guide, so even if you did not get selected to participate in NAEP and you want to go check out the eNAEP download center, you can. The icon for the application is a blue background with a yellow star. And then further down the line, but I think it's important to note, is the assignment of a school coordinator. So school coordinators are the direct contact for NAEP at each site. This has oftentimes been a vice principal, an instructional coach, or a teacher, but that's going to be who I primarily am in touch with throughout the process for NAEP before testing day. And once the school coordinator is assigned, communication about NAEP will pretty much flow through them, and they'll be asked to complete what's called the pre-assessment tasks by December with our testing window, which will open in January. One of the pre-assessment tasks that I did want to mention here, since I have all of you right now, is to provide data about students with disabilities, with the goal being selecting accommodations, if necessary, that will best meet the needs of students for the NAEP assessments. So school coordinators will have a resource to refer to, which is the NAEP inclusion policy, as they make these decisions about participation, which will be sent to you when ready for the 2026-2027 administration year, but it's still with the U.S. Department of Education for approval. As soon as it's ready, it'll be sent out. I'm also a good resource for you to use if you would like to talk about the accommodations that are most appropriate for your students with disabilities. But the goal is having students who get selected participate because the U.S. Department of Education sets a reporting goal for each state, which is a 95% participation rate, which is pretty up there. So it's really, really helpful for our state to have students who are selected participate in the sample if we can. So I did mention the testing window before. The testing window for the science pilot for NAEP this school year is going to run from January 25th to March 19th, 2027. Communication is going to continue throughout the school year as information from schools is needed from me. Most of the information I need from schools will be collected in the assessment management system, and that's meant to ensure data quality, also security of student data, and it's especially important come time for reporting. So our upcoming results release timeline, which everyone is always very interested in. So this is going to be related to our previous assessment administration year. So the 2026 math and reading results will likely be released in spring 2027, if not sooner. For U.S. history and civics results will be released in summer 2027, so after the math and reading results. There is also a 2024 mapping study that's happening right now by a research institute, and that will be released in spring of 2027. The 2022 mapping study was actually just released in February if you're interested in looking at that, and that just shows how state results and NAEP results kind of compare to each other. There will be no results reported for the 2027 administration that's taking place this year because this year is a pilot year in order for us to prepare for the operational science assessment that will take place in 2028. And reporting tools will be found on the Nation's Report Card website, so if you would like to explore more reporting tools, you can also look there. But that's all I have for you when it comes to NAEP today. I'm always happy to answer questions as they come up. You'll please find my contact information in the resource guide, kpoll@cde.ca.gov, and also naep@cde.ca.gov.
Okay, so it's now time for our second questions and answers section. And this time I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Erica.
Thanks, Paul. So I'm going to go ahead and start with answering a couple of CSA questions. We got a great question here. I was told that the Spanish assessment was not practical for the purpose of state CELA by literacy recognition because the scores don't come in right away. For example, students who test in January don't have the scores until June or July. However, we need to know by mid-May for graduation purposes. Can you help me understand the timeline for score release? So the CSA, just want to remind folks, it can be administered once per year at the high school level, meaning a student can take it if they're ready in 9th grade, they can take it again in 10th grade, and honestly, they can take it all the way up to 12th grade. So one time per year. Students can use the scores from any of these high school administrations to meet the requirements for the state CELA by literacy. I will let you know that at the time, the timeline for score release for the CSA will remain as is in order to ensure quality control for scoring. However, we welcome feedback from the field regarding scoring. We take that into consideration, and any changes regarding that timeline will be communicated. Okay. Another question for the CSA. I would like clarification on the CSA assessment for high school. Does this apply for districts that do not have dual immersion program as in the district? Or does this mean all high schools at an LEA can use the CSA assessments towards earning the state seal of biliteracy? So the CSA, as I said before, can be administered to any students in grade 3 through 12 that seek to measure their Spanish language arts and literacy skills in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. You do not need to participate in any specific language program in order to take the CSA. It's available to any student. Okay, let me see if I have any other CSA ones. It looks like I've covered CSA questions. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to continue with some ELPAC questions now. Okay. First question. Are you able to provide examples or further training for when the ELPAC domain exemptions should be considered? Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm going to leave that question for my colleague Jessica, who can speak a little more to it, to answer. I'm going to skip to the next one. When do new LEA coordinators do the certification? So the certification deadline was earlier this week on August 10th. However, you can still complete your certification course through Moodle, so please log on as soon as you're able to. And you referenced the TETA training slide deck for CAASPP, similar to the one that we shared for ELPAC. May I please get a link to that slide deck? So the link to the slide deck is available in the resource guide. It's also available on the Test Administration Trainings and Tutorials webpage of the CAASPP and ELPAC website. And I think that is all the questions for me. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Jessica, so she can answer a few more ELPAC questions for you.
Thanks, you guys. And as Erica started before, the question that came in is, are you able to provide examples or further training for when ELPAC domain exemptions should be considered? And I'd like to say, yeah, we do. Yay. The ELPAC information guide has a chapter called Assessing Students with Disabilities for English Language Proficiency with a subsection named Domain Exemptions. We just mentioned it. It's new, but it has also a new section that has guiding questions for IEP teams that they can consider when considering the full range of accessibility resources, including whether or not a domain exemption is appropriate for a student. In the domain exemption subsection, however, we also have scenarios that are domain specific. And for example, in the listening domain, if a student is profoundly deaf and does not yet understand ASL and is still unable to read closed captioning at this time in their education, the IEP team or Section 504 team could decide to exempt the listening domain. Again, these are all case-by-case choices that should be considered annually. And so there's a link to the guide and to the information guide in your resource guide. Another question that I would like to answer is, if LEAs are notified each spring prior to, the question is actually, how will we know if we are part of the RSVP program this year? And again, great question. LEAs are notified each spring prior to the initial ELPAC administrative scoring trainings. LEAs participate in the RSVP. They will receive scannable versions of writing answer books along with further instructions on the process. If you are unaware if you've been selected for RSVP, you can use the electronic and the web-based lookup tool on the CAASPP and ELPAC website to verify whether your LEA has been assigned to participate in the RSVP. Be sure to direct any questions about test material orders to your success agent, and they can help you get those orders in. And right now, that's all the questions we have, so I will pass it off to Judy.
Actually, let's start with Jessica Valdez.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I'll pass it off to Jessica Valdez.
No worries. Thanks, Dr. J. Thanks, Judy. So we just have one follow-up question regarding SIRS and one of the recent SIRS enhancements, which is the availability of a file that contains student responses to the interim assessment items. And the question is where to access that file in SIRS. So to access that newly available export, you would go into SIRS to the results by item view. The results by item view, which is a view specifically available for the interim assessments in SIRS. So go to results by item, and there are new buttons to export the student responses for the entire interim assessment or just for a single item. So that file, that feature is available in SIRS production. It's also available in the SIRS sandbox, which is that training tool, that publicly available training tool that is available to get familiar with the features and functions of SIRS. And so that new feature will be available for previous year's interim assessment results as well. And just want to encourage you and your colleagues to continue to suggest enhancements to the California Educator Reporting System, our other systems. We do listen. Your voices do carry a lot of clout. And so we do appreciate the suggestions throughout the year. Many of the enhancements to our systems are largely influenced by what we hear from you and your colleagues. So thank you very much. And over to you, Judy.
Thank you, Jessica. Just trying to turn on my camera. All right, so we have a couple of questions around systems. One of the questions was, I noticed that the PDF scores that sync to my SIS do not go further than 3 years back. Did this change recently? I remember seeing all historical scores further than 3 years. So yes, this configuration has been in place for roughly a year. So Tom's application only passes 3 years of SSRs to the SSS vendors for display and for users to use. Next question is, will we have guidance materials or resources available to assist in determining when a student may have used AI to assist them during remote assessments so that a stairs case may be submitted? So at this time, no, we do not have guidance materials, resources, but it is expected that the TA looks for signs for unauthorized technology being used during the assessment. If noticed, the TA uses the communication tools available to the TA to direct the student to shut down the unauthorized technology. If the student continues to use the unauthorized technology or it is clear that the security of the assessment is compromised, TA should pause the test from the student pause the test from the assessment and contact the site CAASPP coordinators. Lastly, we have questions about the workflow for CAS and ELPAC accommodations. How should teachers and case managers submit accommodation requests? And what is the correct procedure for entering and verifying these settings in TOMS to ensure students receive the correct support during testing? So teachers and case managers should work with their site and LEA coordinators to ensure that the correct accessibility resources, including accommodations, are assigned to the students. Coordinators will input these resources in TOMS, and TAs can verify these resources in the TA interface when assessing the students. And again, you can look at the TA interface and what accessibility resources are assigned to students, even when you're doing the interim assessments. And we do have an accessibility webinar that will be scheduled in October that's coming up. So if you have more questions about accessibility, you can always attend that webinar as well. And now I am passing it to Krista. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I have a few questions that came up for NAEP. Thank you so much for asking. So the first question I have is, when will we know if our school has been selected to participate in NAEP for 2026-2027? So school selection notifications were sent out by me in June. If your school was selected as part of the representative sample for the science pilot for this administration year, you would have already been notified. So emails were sent to principals with district assessment coordinators and district technology directors CC'd if the contact information for these folks could be identified by me. But I do typically CC the district staff that I can. And then the next question that I have is, which assessments are required and tied to Title I assurances? So Title I assurances are applied to what's called main NAEP. So that's English and math, NAEP for grades 4 and grades 8. And the next question here I have, does the NAEP notification email go just to the superintendent? So there are several notification emails that will go out for NAEP. The first notification of selection does go out to the superintendent. So that's the first one that goes out. There are several emails that will follow from there. So after the superintendent is notified, districts will then receive an email shortly after. After that, school principals will receive a school notification email. And from there, I communicate primarily with schools unless districts would like to be involved and help with some of the pre-assessment tasks like student data or application installation. Sometimes districts will continue to be involved for that. And then the last question for NAEP that I received is NAEP-related correspondence seems to have been sent to some random folks within our district. How do we go about setting the contact list for NAEP and updating that for our district? And yes, this sometimes does happen with district staff changes. So I typically will find the information for district staff on the district and school websites, so as well as CDE staff lists that sometimes don't get updated for the new school year when I'm sending out these communications. So I do try to include several district staff members CC'd on my district notification emails. So I ask that those folks who are in the districts respond to those emails and give me updated information. So if the school technology director changed, but the district assessment coordinator gets the email, reply to my email and let me know that I need to update for all future communications. And that's what's worked best at this point. I do think that this is going to continue. Not really a perfect method here, but that's what's been working at this point so far. All right, so I think that's all for NAEP. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Devin Triplett from the ELA and Math office.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. Hi, everybody. Again, got a few more questions. On the topic of the student choice field test, is there a way to preview the embedded field test? No, there is not a way to preview it because if we were to do that, that would undermine test security and the validity of the field test itself. It's very important that the field test is carried on just naturally, and that it's in the test, and students don't necessarily know that it is a field test. Second question is, I'm building a data dashboard for my districts and schools. I am pulling claim data for ELA and Math and domain data for the CAASPP. Is there a more granular report to see overall performance on the specific targets? And there's a second part to this question too, but I'll answer this part first. There are target reports in SIRS for ELA and mathematics for student groups of 30 or more and for targets with 10 or more items in the item pool. So yes, there are target reports for ELA and Math. There are some resources in our SIRS guide regarding that. If you're curious about specifications like tables that list the targets, you can find that in the blueprints. You can find that in the content specifications. And those are on the Smarter Balance Content Explorer on the test development page specifically. Now, because you mentioned the CAASPP, at this time, there are no kind of target level reports for the CAASPP. However, you can find CAASPP item specifications. There is a CDE webpage, and it is called CAASPP Item Specifications. Again, that's CAASPP Item Specifications, and there you will be able to find that information. Next question, are there plans to provide a fuller target report for math, not just concepts and procedures? At this time, there are no plans to provide target reports for claims 2, 3, and 4 in mathematics. It is because these claims emphasize the mathematical practices and the content within the items within these claims. The content comes from claim 1. And so there's not necessarily a clean way to provide a target report for these claims at this time. We definitely will pass this feedback on for further investigation. There is a target report FAQ that's online as well that has a lot of great information about target reports. So I can't provide a link right now, but it's basically called CAASPP Assessment Target Reports, FAQs. And then the second part to this question, is it possible to get PT data beyond WER scores? Now, it should be noted that the WER score on the student score report and in the data file is not exactly an ELA PT score. There are 2 items on the ELA PT, and that writing extended response is only one of the 2 items. And that's scored using a writing rubric. Math PTs don't necessarily have a parallel rubric. for all the items. So there's no math PT score or a score for any one of the single math PT items. And then finally, somebody else asked, when will subgroup data be available for 25-26? And then, as mentioned previously, the public release will be October 15th. All right, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Paul and thank everybody. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, Devin. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to all the questions. As we conclude today's AIM presentation, we definitely want to thank you again for those questions and engagement throughout this session. Before we adjourn, we'd like to wrap up with a few final announcements, and let's turn our attention to some upcoming trainings. All right. Well, just as a reminder, next week is the AIM Day 2 or Session 2, and that one's going to be on accountability and the school dashboard. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in here just in case if you need to register. And definitely don't want to miss that one. That will be the second part of the AIM series. And then next we have the SIRS Essentials Training Series, and this series provides free 1-hour live virtual sessions that help educators and administrators effectively use SIRS through focused topic-specific training. We also have the site administrator assessment convenings, and these convenings help site administrators learn about CAASPP and ELPAC interim assessments, available CDE trainings, and resources that support teaching and learning with opportunities for Q&A and collaboration. And then in 2027, we have the Formative Assessment Shared Practice webinar series. And this webinar series focuses on how California educators can use formative assessment tools and strategies to support student learning and classroom instruction. If you look on the resource guide, you'll see a list of dates and registration links. All righty. The California Assessment Conference, also known as CAC, registration is now open. It's going to be held in Riverside, California at the Riverside Convention Center, and it's on October 27th through the 29th. And this conference is amazing. It's designed specifically for classroom educators, site administrators, assessment coordinators, and others. It's a wonderful event. Hopefully you can sign up, and we'll see you in Riverside. And there's a link to register as well. All right, that concludes day 1. And we hope that this information was timely and helpful. And on behalf of CDE, my colleagues at SCOE, we thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that these updates equip you with the tools you need to successfully support California assessments this school year. Take good care, everyone. Hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.